A longtime Michigan quarterback commitment has decommitted. Is this a sign that Bryce Underwood's flip from LSU to Michigan is imminent? We're talking about it. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And if you're on YouTube, smash that like button. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, where you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Bryce Underwood recruitment has taken a lot of twists. Today, we are going to tackle a different angle, which is the fact that longtime Michigan quarterback commitment Carter Smith has decommitted from the Wolverines. You will hear from EJ Holland, a Michigan recruiting expert from On3 The Wolverine, covering Michigan. You'll hear his perspective today. So not just the LSU perspective, you will hear the Michigan perspective. We'll also get into some predictions. That's coming up here. But I want to start by giving you my opinion first. A lot of times I'll do this in reverse. I'll tell you the story, then I'll give you my opinion. But in this instance, I want to tell you my opinion first because I want everything subsequent to sort of supplement what we're about to say. So let me start with a smidge of background. For those who maybe are the unindoctrinated in recruiting, I understand that a lot of people love recruiting and they follow it all the time. I also understand there's a lot of people like, just tell me who we get when we need to get them. The very, very, very abbreviated Cliff's Notes. Bryce Underwood, generational talent, number one player in the country from the state of Michigan, has been committed to LSU for almost a year. He plays high school football about 30 minutes from the big house. And he picked LSU for a lot of reasons that people talk about all the time. And I'll tell you very candidly, I've never spoken to Bryce Underwood. I've never spoken to any of his family, ever. What I do have, however, are a lot of relationships with LSU coaches, LSU recruiting staff, LSU supporting staff, LSU boosters, members of the LSU collective, LSU recruiting analysts, national recruiting analysts. So what I tend to look for when I talk to all these different people, and everybody's got a different story and a different perspective, I look for commonalities. Where are the parts where everybody is sort of telling the same story? And with Bryce Underwood, no matter who you talk to, the parallels are he loves Joe Sloan. Huge part of his recruitment. By the way, Joe Sloan is going to be in Michigan for Bryce Underwood's game on Friday night. We're recording this on Halloween night, on Thursday night. Halloween night, or the Friday night, Joe Sloan's going to be in Michigan at Bryce Underwood's game. Great relationship there. Bryce Underwood wants to play in the SEC. Maybe doesn't think too highly of the whole Michigan man culture, which is great for some, not for everyone. That's okay. Loves the LSU swagger, Odell, Jarvis, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, all of that. Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, Heisman winners, developing quarterbacks, first-round picks, all that stuff. Loves that. And then NIL is a piece of it, but he's a guy that is thinking long-term. Who's going to develop me to make the most money at the next level? That's sort of that's been the commonalities from everybody that you talk to about Bryce Underwood. So Carter Smith decommits. And if you're not familiar with Carter Smith, he's a four-star quarterback out of the state of Florida, some big-time offers. Everybody picked Michigan over Florida and others. And this is a guy that committed to Michigan last November. So he's been committed to Michigan for 11 months, a long time. Some are reading the tea leaves, so to say, that with Michigan's very public re-engagement of their recruitment of Bryce Underwood, that Carter Smith decommitting means, well, Bryce Underwood's about to commit, and that's why Carter Smith is leaving. I don't think so. This is where I'm getting to my opinion, okay? To be very clear, this is my opinion. Here's one thing I know from following this recruiting game for as long as I have. I love the early signing period because it makes both sides, the school and the player, show their hand. And Carter Smith is ready to sign on the dotted line December the 4th and be enrolled in a school in January. Okay? It's been committed to Michigan for 11 months. And now 5 weeks before signing day, the school he's been committed to for 11 months starts to dramatically ramp up their recruitment of another quarterback. Not just another quarterback, but the number one quarterback in the country. And NIL is front and center of those conversations. So if you're Carter Smith and you've been committed to Michigan for 11 months, and here you are 5 weeks from signing day, and you're ramping up your NIL offer for the number one quarterback in the country, do you really want to be a part of a two-quarterback class that includes the number one quarterback in the country that's getting a massive NIL offer, so you know he is going to play over you because of the amount of money they're investing in him? Probably not. So there's a lot of things that could happen here for Carter Smith. You decommit from Michigan. You open up your options to see who's available. What other options might be available? And by the way, one of those options might be Bryce Underwood stays committed to LSU and Carter Smith signs with Michigan. Or one of those options could be, now with 5 weeks before signing day, a lot of schools that maybe aren't settled at quarterback are all of a sudden really interested, and now you got a much better look. There's also the possibility that Carter Smith would have stayed committed to Michigan, and then Bryce Underwood does flip from LSU, and you're sitting there, if you're Carter Smith, days before the early signing period, or maybe the day of the early signing period. And all of a sudden, the school you've been committed to for a year has another quarterback in the class. And for a year, you've shut down your commitment. You've not taken visits. You don't have relationships with staff. And now where do you go? You've left yourself with no options. It's one of the reasons I love the early signing period, because it prevents situations like what's happened. By the way, I'll give you a couple of examples with LSU. Some that have worked for and against LSU. Do you remember Tosh Davis? Tosh Davis was a linebacker out of North Louisiana, had been committed to LSU for a long time. On National Signing Day, Texas swooped in, flipped him. Now, that was before NIL, so whatever money Texas gave him was under the table. But that was a guy that LSU had assumed was going to be in their class. And then all of a sudden, like that, on one day, now you're down a linebacker. Not great for the school, but it works both ways. Do you remember Tevin Lawson? Tevin Lawson's a kid from Denham Springs. He was the first commitment of LSU's class in his signing class year. Stayed committed to LSU, didn't take any visits, was going to play for the hometown team. And on National Signing Day, LSU realized, we don't have a spot for you. So they had to tell Tevin Lawson, can't sign. We don't have a spot. That's when it was hard capped at 25. So on signing day, this kid who had been committed to LSU for 2 years, all of a sudden didn't have a spot. So now, after not having gone through any recruitment process whatsoever, he has to open up his recruitment and find somewhere to go. He landed at TCU. I get what Carter Smith is doing. He's not going to risk getting to signing day, have Bryce Underwood flip to Michigan, and he have no options. So it's brilliant. Decommit, see what options are out there for you. And maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5, maybe on signing day, Bryce Underwood signs with LSU and Michigan goes to Carter Smith and says, hey, Carter, still got your spot if you want it. And he ends up in Ann Arbor. Maybe, or maybe not. I don't know. But I don't think that Carter Smith decommitting from Michigan is an automatic sign that he's going to end up, that Bryce Underwood is going to end up flipping. Quite the contrary. I think this is Carter Smith taking a very heady play and approach to this to keep his options open so he doesn't end up without a chair in this game of musical chairs when the music stops. That's my take on it. I'm going to step aside really quickly. And when we come back, I'm going to welcome on EJ Holland. EJ Holland works for On3 The Wolverine. covering Michigan for On3. And I'm going to get the Michigan perspective of this whole situation involving Bryce Underwood and Carter Smith. You're going to hear that next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, and our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans like you and me. The fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. You know what else might give you a bit of a LSU fan fuel this week? Wasn't great in Kyle Field this past Saturday, how it ended, but how about how it started? Aaron Anderson, 76 yards. Mason Taylor's touchdown over the shoulder. So many great moments early in that game. Too bad it couldn't last. But how about coming up a week from Saturday, LSU, Alabama, the game we all agonize over and pine for 12 months. It's almost here. 5 Hour Energy knows no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate, ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. So what's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available at 5hourenergy.com. Ships nationwide. I have shared with you my personal perspective on the Bryce Underwood, Carter Smith situation. I've shared with you my firsthand conversations with LSU staff members, support staff members, recruiting staff members, boosters, collective members, LSU recruiting people, national recruiting people. What are the Michigan folks saying about the Bryce Underwood situation? Well, few better to call on than EJ Holland. EJ Holland works for On3 The Wolverine, which is, of course, part of the On3 network covering the University of Michigan. And I started by asking him, this was on my radio show After Further Review, by the way. You can hear this entire interview. If you go podcast or YouTube and search After Further Review, you'll find it. But I asked him that for just to lay the groundwork, the big picture overview of the situation with Bryce Underwood in Michigan.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I mean, Bryce Underwood has been committed to LSU for basically a year. All signs pointed to him being extremely happy with that commitment. He has a great relationship with Joe Sloan and Brian Kelly. And on top of that, LSU has done a great job from the NIL perspective. Michigan, was in the mix for Bryce Underwood early on, but at the same time, it always seemed like he had a wandering eye towards the South. For those of you who don't know, Bryce is from the state of Michigan, about 30 minutes from Ann Arbor. And, I think Michigan kind of started to feel pessimistic there around November of last year. So they ended up taking a commitment from Carter Smith out of Florida. And there was no real movement between Michigan and Underwood until here recently. Michigan hasn't really been proactive with NIL, but they recently changed their approach. I think desperate times call for desperate measures. If you watch Michigan football this year, the quarterback situation is not good. And therefore, I think people around the program got restless, decided to make a big push for Underwood, and we're kind of seeing where things go from there.
So it's interesting to hear it from the Michigan perspective and to hear a lot of the same things that we're saying on this end. Again, remember what I told you at the start. I'm looking for parallels. Where are people with different backgrounds who aren't necessarily communicating with each other? Where are they all saying the same thing? That's when you look for commonalities in a story and you look for truths. When multiple people, independent of each other, start saying the same thing. So we've heard a lot about NIL also, about Michigan is ramping up their NIL offer. So I asked sort of specifically, what can you tell us about Michigan's NIL offer?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to put the details out there, but, they have a substantial offer on the plate, multiple millions of dollars. There was a report from On3 National that the offer was around or north of $5 million. I actually think it's a little bit more than that. And I wouldn't be surprised if LSU has an offer out more than that. I think these two programs, or at least those around these two programs, are willing to swing for the fences and continuing to counter each other. I think where LSU might have the advantage aside from NIL is just the fact that, again, Bryce has always had a wandering eye for the South. He had every opportunity to stay home and commit to Michigan before this, recent NIL battle. Again, the relationship with Joe Sloan is super strong. He loves the pass-happy offense that LSU has. So, and he just likes the culture down in Baton Rouge. I'm not sure that he's completely sold on Michigan's development of quarterbacks or the offense, but obviously he would have an opportunity to come in and start as a true freshman at Michigan. He would be the best quarterback in the room right now. There's a chance Nussmeier comes back for LSU, so maybe that becomes a little bit more appealing. So there are some outside factors that could work in favor for LSU. A lot of them that could work in favor for LSU, maybe a few that could work in favor for Michigan. But at the end of the day, I think the most important factor is NIL, and it'll be interesting to see who comes up with the more significant offer by the time we reach signing day.
Okay, did you notice a few of the buzzwords? Remember where we started? I was telling you how LSU people, all the people I talked to, from boosters and collective people and coaching and coaches and recruiting analysts and support staff members and everybody. Oh, the relationship with Joe Sloan. He wants to be part of the culture at LSU. He wants to play in the SEC. He wants the offense, wants development. Michigan doesn't develop quarterbacks. It's one thing when you hear all the LSU people say it. Now the guy that covers Michigan is saying it. Saying the same exact thing. So you're looking for these parallels. So now what about Carter Smith? I shared you my opinion on Carter Smith, the quarterback out of Florida who committed to Michigan and why he decommitted. So I left this very open-ended. And I asked, give us the deets. What's happening there with Carter Smith?
Yeah, that was really interesting. I was in communication with Carter and his family. I've really grown close to the Smith family throughout this process. Great people. I thought they were great fits at Michigan, but I just don't think they like the way the situation was handled. Carter gave his commitment back in November. He helped build this class. I mean, he's literally been committed for almost a year as well. So, he had a lot of pride in being part of Michigan's class and helping recruit some of the other kids in the class. He even had a big Michigan license plate driving around Southwest Florida. He was all in on Michigan. And then, again, at the time, Michigan preached, transformational over transactional. So Smith really bought into that, and then for Michigan to start taking the NIL angle with Bryce Underwood, I just don't think it's that well. And, Smith is a competitor. I don't think he was afraid to compete with Bryce Underwood. But if you're paying millions of dollars to someone, it's not really a fair fight, right? You're going to start the guy you're paying millions of dollars to. And I think that was a big concern of his.
In a 1 minute and 13-second answer from a man who makes his living covering recruiting for Michigan, when asked about Carter Smith decommitting from Michigan, at no point in that answer did he mention opening the door for Bryce Underwood. He said all the things that I said at the beginning of this episode. You have a guy that's been loyal, that's been committed for more than a year, wants to be part of this class. Then all of a sudden, the school you've been committed to for a year starts actively and aggressively pursuing another quarterback 5 weeks before signing day and throwing around massive NIL numbers. What does that mean for their commitment to you? Not much. That's why Carter Smith decommitted. Not going to say he won't end up at Michigan, but something to be said for, hey, you're dating somebody. Guys, you're dating a girl. And all of a sudden you look across the room and you see a pretty good looking girl. And you think, you know what? I'm going to go shoot my shot. Not that you don't love the girl you're with, but man, you wonder what if. So you go shoot your shot. You get rejected. You expect her to be waiting for you when you come back? Probably not. It's a safe bet. It's a really tough ask. Sometimes it makes sense when we put it in those terms. But maybe Carter Smith ends up back in this class. Maybe not. But I don't think he's leaving just to open up a spot for Bryce Underwood. I think he's leaving because he knows Michigan is the one now with wandering eyes. So what do we think actually happens here? Make some predictions when we wrap up next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Visit FanDuel.com. So what happens with Bryce Underwood? I asked EJ Holland for his prediction.
Man, if I had to pick today, I would say he sticks with LSU. I don't know if the dollar gap between Michigan and LSU will be significant enough to where those other factors that I mentioned, the quarterback development, the Sloan relationship, Sloan's going to be at his game this week, the offense, I don't know if, and just the culture fit, I don't know if those factors will be pushed to the side if the NIL, difference isn't significant. So I'm not sure I'm sure Michigan will try to push as much as it can. I'm sure they'll try to raise as much money as possible, but will there be that significant of a gap to where these other factors don't really matter? I'm not sure. I would put my confidence level for Michigan at about 35% maybe is what I would be comfortable with right now.
I think 35% might even be high. I asked someone affiliated with LSU that question on Thursday, and this person told me 98% sure Bryce Underwood sticks with LSU, because there's really only one scenario, as I see it. There's one scenario whereby Bryce Underwood does not end up in Baton Rouge. Because remember, he's been committed to LSU for a year. He's quite comfortable leaving home. He doesn't have a long eye for Michigan, the University of Michigan. You've heard me say it. You heard EJ Holland say it. He loves the culture at LSU in the South, wants to be in the SEC, the pass-happy offense, the development of quarterbacks, relationship with Joe Sloan. None of that exists at Michigan. Bryce Underwood has not taken a visit. He has not been on Michigan's campus since July of 2023, when Jim Harbaugh was the coach before last season. So, if all of those things weigh so heavily in favor of LSU, what's the one thing, singular one thing that could get Bryce Underwood to flip? Money. Now, there are reports out there, as you've seen, that Bryce Underwood is going to get in the neighborhood of $5 million for 3 to 4 years. I will tell you that I do not believe, with some very candid conversations I've had, that LSU's offer is at $5 million over 3 or 4 years. It's not that high. But it's still very competitive. And as Bryce Underwood and his family have routinely said, they're not thinking short term. Yes, NIL is part of it. The money's part of it. But it's not the singular thing that's going to drive the decision. He's thinking long term. How do I go, have a great time in college, play, get developed, and then ultimately go to the NFL where I'm a top 5 pick. You put $30 billion in your pocket guaranteed, and then you're playing toward a second contract where maybe you're making $500 million if you're Travis or if you're Patrick Mahomes. There's one scenario, singular one, that would cause Bryce Underwood to not end up in Baton Rouge. And it's if Michigan or somebody made the Godfather offer. You come and you drop a giant pile of money on Bryce Underwood that is so outlandish, he can't say no. And I don't think Dave Portnoy's $3 million is going to get it done. I'm talking you have to get in the neighborhood of $7 to $10 million. And if you do that, he'll listen. He should. And if he doesn't, he's being poorly advised. Because if someone's going to come and hand you that pile of cash, you take it. As much as I love LSU and want to see Bryce Underwood in Baton Rouge, if Michigan or some other school comes and drops $7 to $10 million in his lap, he should take it. Now, as long as it's competitive, the dollar amount, as long as the dollar amount is competitive, LSU is going to land Bryce Underwood because of all the other reasons we said that weigh so heavily in favor of LSU. But what if somebody comes along and makes the offer you can't refuse? Well, in that instance, not much you can do about it. Unless if LSU wants to pony up that amount of money, which they haven't done yet in NIL. But every day is a new day in this world, and we'll see where it lands. My confidence is very high. Bryce Underwood ends up in the LSU class. Okay, that'll do it for us here on today's episode of Locked on LSU. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, go check out Locked on SEC with my guy, Chris Gordy, LSU guy. You can find Locked on SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are listening on podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked on LSU, your team every day.